Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We explore the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories from across the world. In tonight's story, we follow an aspiring historian deep into the Appalachian Mountains, hoping to preserve forgotten folklore and the wisdom of old-timers. But when an interview with a local man unlocks an ancient family curse and a hidden ghost town reveals something far worse than old stories, this simple passion project turns into a deadly game of survival. A cursed bloodline, vanished towns swallowed by the forest, ghosts of massacres past, and a legendary predator stalking the mountains for centuries, still hungry for revenge, being hunted on lonely ridgelines, finding blood-stained hunting blinds, stepping inside a mine where no sound should echo. This is the kind of nightmare that makes you think twice before exploring Appalachian folklore firsthand. Stay tuned and remember, in the Appalachian Mountains, some legends aren't just stories, they're waiting. Viewer discretion is advised. I first met Clyde 10 years ago at a small diner in Christiansburg, Virginia. I had just graduated with a history degree and a minor in Appalachian Studies from Radford University. Being a transplant from Michigan, I ended up falling in love with the New River Valley and chose to stay here after graduation. There's unfortunately not a lot of work in my field in this area, so I worked for a landscape company and played historian in my spare time. My goal was to simulate what the Foxfire Heritage Organization had done and create a collection of Appalachian knowledge straight from the horse's mouth, the only real difference being that it would have a distinct NRV flavor. This brings me back to Clyde. While there are a few heritage sites and museums in the NRV, I've learned that the best knowledge of any area comes from the people that have lived there their entire lives. On my days off, I'd scour the burgs, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford area, trying to find older folks so that I could ask them their stories. The day I walked into that diner in Christiansburg and overheard an older man telling anyone who would listen all about the proper way to press sorghum, I knew I'd found a never-ending fount of knowledge. I introduced myself and told him what I wanted to do, and I can honestly say I've never seen an old man light up the way Clyde did. That first day, we talked for close to 2 hours. He dazzled me with stories of growing sorghum, making salt rising bread, hunting and trapping alone at the age of 10 to provide for his family when times got hard, and all kinds of things you'd expect from an old man that had lived in Appalachia his whole life. I held up my now almost full notebook and thanked him for his time. "Same time next week?" he asked. And so it was. For close to a year, we'd meet at the diner, drink coffee, and shoot the breeze. Our meetings always ended the same way. "Same time next week?" I was gathering a lot of information, and I realized I might actually be able to write a book based on just Clyde's stories. That thought alone fueled my fire, and I made it my mission to finish my Foxfire-style book, to get it published, and to get as much information as I could about this area from Clyde. My girlfriend, a nice country girl from a little map dot called FT, Chiswell further south in the valley, was incredibly supportive and even suggested that I ask Clyde about some of the local myths, legends, and ghosts. "See if you can get something deeper than the same tired Graham's Forge Mansion stories. I bet that would make a really good chapter," she told me one morning as I was getting ready to meet with Clyde. "That's not a bad idea, babe. He told me his family were some of the first settlers in the valley. If anyone knows about the land, it's that man." I met Clyde at the same table we'd sat at every Saturday for the last year. "What'll it be this time, son? I ever tell you about when they dammed up the river and made Smith Mountain Lake?" "No, you haven't," I said, "but I actually wanted to ask you about the local myths and legends of this area." Clyde's face changed. It was a look I'd never seen on his face before. Was it fear? Can't you just use the Google for that? Ain't no sense in me telling you a story you can read for yourself. "Actually, Clyde, I wanted to know the stories that your family passed down. You said y'all have been here since the 1670s. Tell me about that stuff." Clyde lowered his voice, his usual smile gone. "I'll tell you one story, just one, and then we ain't never gonna talk about it again, understand?" I nodded and swallowed hard. Something felt incredibly off. I'll do my best to retell the story from the notes I took that day. This story is real old, passed down from my granddaddy's granddaddy's granddaddy. I forget how many greats that would be. Anyhow, back then there wasn't anything here. Just miles and miles of woods and ridgeline. Granddaddy was part of the first scouting party that came down here. Damn near turned back home until they came up on the new river. They knew that with some work they could clear the land and grow crops here. Granddaddy and 3 other men volunteered to stay and set up homesteads while the rest of the party went back east to tell the governor about what they found. It was another 6 months before their families made it out to them. Granddaddy told stories about Indians and great big cats that stalked the homestead on all sides at night. Back then, control of the valley was contested by the Cherokee, the Shawnee, and the settlers, so it's hard to say who or what was really in the woods. Stories about the great big cats kept on for years, and near as I can tell, they always popped up shortly after the settlers had a skirmish with their savages. People would sometimes go missing after a cat sighting, but that was the way of the frontier. So, what exactly was this big cat? I asked him, kind of grinning. Is, he replied. You said was, you mean what is. It's still out there, somewhere up on the ridge. It's still there and it's looking for blood. At this point, part of me wondered if Clyde's story wasn't just a family legend that had grown bigger over the years. The Wampus Cat does appear in old Cherokee tales, mostly described as a great cat or mountain lion spirit, but not as a talking demon. Still, Clyde spoke with such conviction that I couldn't help but feel a chill down my spine. For some reason, I felt my blood running cold. I knew this was just a silly old story, but something about the way he said, "looking for blood," made me incredibly uneasy. Okay, so what is it then? The Cherokee call it Iwa. We always call it the Wampus Cat. It's a demon of some sort supposed to drive a man insane just by looking at it. Way back before whites ever stepped foot here, they used to hunt the Cherokee. The story goes that after a while, people got sick of it and sent their best and bravest warrior to fight it. Imagine that. One man against a demon. Anyhow, Standing Bear went out looking for Iwa and was gone for weeks, and most had assumed he was dead until one night he come hauling ass into camp trying to rip his own eyes out. His wife, I forgot her name, vowed to get revenge on the demon that did this, so she went to the village shaman. The shaman gave her a mask made from a bobcat's face and said if she could surprise the demon that the spirit of the bobcat could defeat it, so she heads out and finds the demon drinking from the river. When she jumps out of the bushes to confront it, it turns and sees her mask and starts to tearing itself up like it was getting attacked by a bobcat. The demon begged the woman to stop the torment, and the woman struck a deal. She told the demon that if it stopped hunting them and started protecting her people, she would let it go. Iwa agreed, and the woman took her mask off. The demon is now able to stand, turned itself into a giant bobcat, and took off into the woods. So, this Wampus Cat is the protector of the Cherokee? Clyde nodded. And it's still up in the hills, looking for blood? Whose blood? Mine, Clyde said with a small smile. By the 1750s, we'd pushed the Cherokee out of the valley, damn near to North Carolina. You know Fount Chiswell? Well, it ain't just a fancy name. It used to be an actual fort. They built it around 1761. Well, when we threw up the fort, the Cherokee got real mad and sent a war party up to try and take it from us. We massacred them, all but one of them. We sent him back to his tribe to send the message that the valley was ours now. The story goes that he called out for Iwa to protect his people. That's when the Wampus Cat showed up. Started dragging men into the woods, and the men in the fort had to listen to screams all night while old Wampus devoured them, or tortured them, or whatever he did. They were never seen again afterward. How it relates to me is this. One of my many great-granddaddies was there. He helped kill all those people. The way I understand it, the Wampus Cat has been hunting the families of those responsible ever since. A lot of those men's families stayed in this area for years. Shoot, I told you my family's been here for forever. Anyway, I'm the last one left. After Johnny McGee went missing on a hunting trip back in '83, I'm the last descendant of the men responsible for the Fount Chiswell massacre. I quit hunting after Johnny died, quit going in the woods, and I'm glad I never had no kids, so when I'm gone, it's over. Come on, Clyde, you really expect me to believe this? I laughed. Believe it or don't, Clyde snapped angrily. It done took my daddy when I was 9, I seen it. Why do you think I had to provide for my family at 10? Dragged him straight out the deer blind and we never seen him again. I'm I'm sorry, Clyde, I offered an apology. Don't be. I know it sounds crazy. I just know it's my time. Won't be long now, for it finds me and drags me to hell for the sins of my ancestors. Now, if you'll excuse me, I best be getting home. And with that, Clyde threw 10 on the table to pay for his meal and walked towards the door. Same time next week? I asked earnestly. Clyde turned and gave me a weary smile. See you when I see you, kid. The next Saturday, I went to the diner, but Clyde wasn't there. 2 more weeks went by and I still hadn't seen Clyde, and I decided to go to his house to check on him. He was an old man after all, and I needed to make sure he was okay. Clyde's old 1950s model Chevy wasn't in the driveway, and his normally immaculate lawn was now wildly overgrown. I knocked on his door for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes of no response, I walked around the house trying to peek through the blinds. One blind was just broken enough that I could see into Clyde's bedroom. I saw his open gun safe. It was empty, and there were empty ammunition boxes scattered all over the room. I kicked in his back door and rushed into the house, fully expecting to see that he'd taken his own life. Instead, I found an empty house. As I was walking back out, I noticed a note on the kitchen table that said, "Knew you couldn't stay away. If you're reading this, it's because I lost my fight with a demon. The truck is yours if you want it. You'll find it in Jefferson National Forest." I immediately contacted the police and headed for JNF. Clyde's disappearance kicked off a weeks-long manhunt. The only things they found were 2 spent shotgun shells, blood that they determined belonged to Clyde, and giant sets of bobcat prints. One volunteer said that they were at least 3 times too large to be a bobcat's. Clyde's body was never recovered. Of course, skeptics pointed out that large bobcats and even mountain lions had been sighted in this part of the Appalachians despite their rarity. The prints found could have belonged to an unusually large feline, or even been distorted by the muddy ground. As for Clyde's blood, some suggested he may have fallen victim to a hunting accident or an animal attack, but for those of us who knew him, the timing and circumstances felt far too eerie. Clyde's death put a halt on my book. How could I continue now? How could I include the story about the demon that killed my friend? It wasn't a bobcat that killed Clyde. It was an ancient evil living in the forests of the New River Valley. 18 days ago, after posting my last story and receiving words of encouragement from you guys, I started crawling through the pages and pages of notes I had left over from my interviews. One in particular stuck out more than the others, and while the story itself isn't the scariest, what's happened since has caused me to put my house on the market and move as far away from the New River Valley as I can. In one of my interviews with Clyde, dated 6/21/2008, he told me about a time where he had stumbled upon a ghost town up in the mountains while out on a hunting trip as a kid. Again, I'll try to do it justice, and I should preface this by saying that Clyde told me this story before he told me about the Wampus Cat. Once, when I was probably 14 or 15, I found a ghost town while I was hunting, Clyde said from behind his 6th cup of coffee. I leaned forward eagerly. Do you know what the name of it was? What happened? Why was it abandoned? Easy, son. I can only answer one question at a time. I didn't know the name then, and I still don't know it now. It's pretty normal to find old abandoned cabins and such up on the ridge, but this was a whole town. I'm talking 15 houses and a general store. I ain't ever seen it on no map, and I never heard anyone talk about it. Okay, but why was it abandoned in the first place? I asked, my pencil hovering above my notebook. I'll get there when I get there. I ain't done telling you about it yet, Clyde replied. Near as I could tell, it was an old coal town. Of course, I only say that because I saw the boarded-up entry further up the ridge. Anyway, being a dumb kid, I decided to poke around. Clyde stopped and sipped his coffee before continuing. I went to the general store, and I'll tell you, it looked like a damn museum, just covered in dust. Nothing was out of place. All the shelves were still stocked, and there were even some Confederate notes in the till. I took them with me. Ain't never found a Civil War or anything I didn't keep for myself. I hastily scribbled, Civil War Mine Town, in my notes. Okay, so what else did you see? I went into 3 or 4 of the houses, and it was the same as the store. Everything looked like it hadn't been touched in 100 years. Everything had a thick layer of dust on it. And the real spooky part was that it looked like people had just up and left. Some of the houses had tables set like folks were about to sit down for supper. Abandoned. In a hurry. I said slowly as I scribbled the words in my notebook. Did you see anything that could have explained why everyone left so quickly? Clyde nodded. It was starting to get dark and I needed to get home soon or Mama would have worried, but I had to check out one more house before I left. I decided to check the house closest to mine entry. I felt myself involuntarily shaking with excitement. From a historian's standpoint, this was going to be an amazing story. What did you see? If you're pausing for dramatic effect, it's definitely working. Clyde chuckled and continued. This house was a wreck inside. Looks like it was completely ransacked. Tables were flipped, dishes were broken, everything was just destroyed. At the time, I figured some of them bluebellies, Union soldiers, had probably found out about the mine and came to shut it down. What do you mean, at the time? I asked, my mouth now incredibly dry. I asked my Uncle Joe about it when I got home that evening. He told me there weren't any Union fellas. He said he'd heard a story when he was a kid, about a mining town that had been abandoned because of some curse or monster or some such. Something came out of mine and attacked him. I felt the wind immediately leaving my sails. A monster, Clyde? Really? That's all you have for me? Didn't say whether or not I believed it, Clyde shot back with a sly grin. Just telling you what I was told. Do you at least remember where it is? I guess it wouldn't hurt to take some pictures of it if it's still there. Course, I remember where it's at. Ain't no one in the whole valley that knows them hills like I do. Clyde sloppily drew a map in my notebook and put a large X where the town was supposed to be. X marks the spot, son. And with that, Clyde called the waitress over to get his check and asked me, same time next week? I nodded and smiled, but I felt defeated. Sadly, that was as far as my adventure went, that is, until recently. After some of you told me I should revive my book to honor Clyde, I decided to find that ghost town. 2 weeks ago, I set out in search of the mine. Following Clyde's sloppy map proved difficult, but not impossible. I drove for what felt like an eternity, and found myself on a back road somewhere between Pearisburg and Narrows, very close to the West Virginia border. Clyde's map had proven true up until this point. I saw that I should have been approaching my next and final turn and slowed down. I passed the same small opening in the tree line probably 5 times before I realized that that was the road I was supposed to be on. I gently urged that old 1950 Chevy Clyde had left me up the hill. After about a quarter of a mile, the road ran out and I was met with nothing but trees. Of course, why wouldn't I have to hack my way through the boondocks? I muttered to myself as I climbed down from the cab. I grabbed my camera, my Nalgene bottle, and a small mag light and started picking my way through the trees. I must have climbed that hill for an hour. Even though Clyde's map said the town was only 3.5 miles off the road, the vegetation was thick and the hill was muddy, which definitely slowed me down. When I finally broke through the tree line, I found myself in a large clearing, and just as Clyde had said, I saw the ghost town. I quickly grabbed my camera and started snapping pictures. Everything was more or less as he had described it, save for the now collapsed general store. As I made my way through the town, taking pictures the whole time, I found myself in awe of the fact that it really did look as if everyone had vanished. I made my way toward the entrance to the mine, and just like Clyde had said, it was still boarded up. I turned to look at the house closest to the mine, and noticed what looked like large and jagged claw marks all around one of the windows. Knowing now about the Wampus Cat, I felt my throat tighten. It was probably just some kids messing around back here that did that, I said to myself, trying to remain calm. I turned back to the mine and snapped a picture of the worn sign near its entrance. Through all the grime and chipped paint, I could faintly make out the words, "Danger inside! Keep out!" I knew then that I should have left it at that, maybe taken a few more pictures and then headed home to forget all about this place, but something felt like it was calling me to the mine. The rotted boards broke away with minimal effort. As I absently reached for my flashlight and I stared into the dark mouth of mine, I thought I heard a loud whisper, "Come to me, E." I froze and looked around. Sure, I'd find some bumpkin laughing at my fear, but I saw nothing. Later, I would learn that old mines often produce strange acoustic effects. A slight breeze passing through narrow tunnels can mimic whispered voices. At the time, though, alone and tense, it sounded unnervingly human. That's when I realized that I couldn't hear anything other than my own scared breathing. No birds, no crickets, no wind, absolutely nothing. I'm still kicking myself for what I did next. That's when I realized that I couldn't hear anything other than my own scared breathing. No birds, no crickets, no wind, absolutely nothing. I'm still kicking myself for what I did next. I took a deep breath as I clicked on my flashlight and then plunged myself into the darkness. 150 plus years of mustiness and animal droppings filled my nostrils, and I involuntarily retched. When I regained my composure, I could have sworn I heard a hoarse and throaty laugh come from deeper in the mine. Nope, you're just scaring yourself. It's nothing, I repeated to myself over and over as I forced myself to continue, my feet feeling like they were 100 pounds each. I walked and walked and walked. According to my watch, I'd been following this tunnel for at least 20 minutes. Wow, this mine runs deep. My voice trailed off as I entered into a large cavern deep inside the mountain. Whoa, was all I could muster. I heard that laugh again, this time coming from above me. I whipped around with my flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling of the cavern. I thought I saw something flash past the beam, but I definitely heard something moving. I tried to rationalize what I was hearing, maybe a bat colony disturbed by my light or an animal moving among the rocks. But my mind was racing, filled with every frightening story Clyde had ever told. I spun around again, trying to get a bead on what was in there with me. I felt a huge rush of air from behind me and heard what sounded like massive wings flapping. I spun again, and that's when I saw it standing on the cavern floor about 20 feet from me. This abomination, this clear affront to God, stood easily 7 feet tall and was covered in a matted black fur. Where arms should have been, it had 2 large leathery wings. Its eyes glowed like a cat's as my shaking hands tried to hold the flashlight on it. It let out a snarl and then started to laugh again. I knew you'd come to me. They always come to me. It roared as it flapped its wings and rose into the air. I turned back to the tunnel and ran, the fastest I've ever run in my life. I ran and ran, refusing to look back. I heard the creature's wings flapping and jaws snapping behind me. I've thought about this moment many times since. Was it really wings? Or was it the sound of my own panicked footsteps echoing strangely through the old mine? Rational explanations were little comfort in that moment. I simply ran. You should have never come here, it jeered. Now you'll die like the people in that village. I kept running, and soon I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. With my last bit of strength, I threw myself from the mine and into the grass outside. I quickly rolled onto my back and instinctively shielded my face. 3 agonizing seconds passed before I realized I wasn't dead. I scrambled to my feet and looked at the entrance to the mine. Just within the shadows, I saw the creature standing with its chest heaving in clear rage. I backed all the way out of the town, never taking my eyes off the entrance to the mine. It wasn't until I reached the tree line that I felt safe enough to turn and run. The trip down the mountain was a lot faster than my journey up it. Of course, it helped that I ran, fell all the way to the bottom. When I got home, I locked all the windows and doors. I didn't sleep that night. I haven't really slept since, even now that some 700 miles and 3 states separate me from that mine. I don't know what I saw in that mine, but I'm never coming back to the NRV. My house in Blacksburg is for sale if anyone is interested. Just be careful, you never know what you'll find up here in the mountains. This story of Appalachian madness doesn't come from our dear friend Clyde. I'll be retelling a story told to me by my friend David. I met David when we were juniors at Radford. We sat next to each other in one of our Appalachian Studies classes. David is from Wytheville, Virginia, located about 10 miles southwest of Faint Chiswell, and a former Navy corpsman with 2 deployments to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan. I'm including that excerpt about his military service so that you can understand that there's not much that scares him. Before I retell his story, it's important to gain some context. Major Graham's mansion is a local landmark. It's as ingrained in the history of this place as anything could be. It's also rumored to be haunted. So much so that an episode of Ghost Hunters was filmed there. In 1826, Squire David Graham purchased some 2,000 acres from another family that's still prominent in this area. The land itself was supposedly tainted by evil even before Squire Graham purchased it. The property's original owner was murdered by 2 of his slaves, Bob and Sam. According to the legend, it wasn't pretty either. They supposedly caved in his head with an axe and then shoved his body into a barrel of moonshine. The slaves were later hanged somewhere on the property. To this day, people report seeing the slaves walking around the property. Other times, they see them hanging from the tree they were hanged from. In 1838, the Major was born. By the mid-1860s, Major Graham had returned from 3 years of service in the Confederate Army. The Major was now the owner of the property and had renovations completed to add on additional rooms and structures. One such structure became an officer's lounge, Confederate recovery room, and because of this, many visitors to the mansion report seeing Confederate soldiers walking the halls. There are a few other spirits and disembodied voices reported to haunt the property, and for a small fee you can stay the night in the mansion and conduct your own ghost hunt. Mostly the mansion is used as a Halloween attraction, especially these days. Every year people from all over come to visit the haunted house on Halloween. One year I met someone that came all the way from Columbus, Ohio to visit the attraction. The haunted house is full of jump scares and creepy music, but ignores the supposed real haunted history of the property, which, in my opinion, is much scarier. According to David, sneaking onto the property and trying to spend the most time alone, there is almost like a rite of passage for many young men from Wythe County. Most guys make it 20, maybe 30 minutes before they scare themselves enough to come running back to the car. Most guys, but not David. Now that we've set the scene, let me tell you the story David told me all those years ago. When I was 16 or 17, I was a junior in high school. So however old that is, I broke into Major Graham's mansion, David told me one day after class. The Halloween place? Why? I asked, not sure where this was going. Because it's really haunted, he replied with a grin. Like for real ghost and demon type shit? Yeah, sure it is, I laughed. Did you remember to bring your proton pack with you jackass? David wasn't smiling anymore. No, man. I'm serious. We saw things there. Real fucked up things. I had to hear this story. David had a flair for embellishment. I wouldn't call him an outright liar, but he was known to tell big fish stories. What did you see? Please tell me. The anticipation is killing me. You're a real asshole sometimes, but I'll tell you. So like I said, I broke into the mansion when I was younger. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why I even thought it would be fun, but I did it. Me and a few buddies drove back there one night. It must have been close to midnight when we got out there. We had to ditch the truck pretty far from the mansion because we didn't want anyone to see the headlights. So we stumbled through the trees for a while before we came up on chain link fence at the back of the property. My buddy Chunky, he wanted to cut the fence since his fat ass couldn't climb over, but we ended up getting him over it. We decided to check out the main house first. Oddly enough, the door was open. I would have figured it would have been locked, but it swung right open. There's a room upstairs that's supposed to be haunted by a little girl. The story goes that if you roll a ball into the room, that it'll get rolled right back out. Okay, and did it? Did the ball come rolling back out? I asked with as much sarcasm as I could muster. Well, we didn't have a ball to roll in there, so we walked in and stood there for about 5 minutes just listening. I swear to you that I heard a little girl giggle, but Chunky and Seth will tell you otherwise. Anyway, after that room proved to be a bust, we headed to the Confederate room. It was dead silent in there, and nobody heard anything. So when does this story get scary, Davy? I asked, knowing full well he hated being called anything but David. When we went to the old slave quarters, you asshole, David shot back with a grin. We headed out to the slave quarters because that's where most people claim to see Bob and Sam. I wish that's all I saw, he said, his voice trailing off as he looked across the quad in front of the library. Don't be such a drama queen, I said, pushing his shoulder and shocking him out of whatever trance he was in. No, I'm serious, it was bad, dude. We made it out to the outside buildings and it was the darkest I ever remember it being. We didn't have any flashlights or anything, so we kind of just guessed where they were. Well, we found them, and as we're walking up, both Chunky and Seth stop. Y'all hear that? Chunky asked the group. I didn't hear anything, but Seth grunted in agreement. Shut up and listen, David, Chunky said to me. I remember holding my breath and straining to hear. Hear what? God, your stories take 6 years to tell. A baby screaming loud. I finally heard it and it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was otherworldly, yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Years later, I read an article about acoustic hotspots in old buildings where wind passing through cracked walls or pipes can produce high-pitched walls. Maybe that was what they heard. Or maybe it was something else I wasn't there to know for sure. We had no business hearing a baby screaming and it worried me. Part of me said to run, but the other part of me told me I had to help that baby, so I ran into the building. Now his story was starting to creep me out. I couldn't think of anything smartest to say, so I just nodded. I saw the outline, or silhouette, whatever you want to call it, of like a toddler. It looked to be about the size of a 3-year-old. I called out, "Hey buddy, are you okay?" I realized I'd been holding my breath. Just a second ago, I was thinking he was full of it, but something about the way he told the story made it seem so very real. Well then, I saw the shadow, or whatever, move, like it was turning around, and where a face should have been, I only saw 2 red eyes glowing. I've heard similar reports from others who visited the mansion red eyes in the dark. Often these are explained as reflections from animal eyes, raccoons, owls, catching light in just the right way. Still, the fear in David's voice when he told this part of the story was hard to dismiss. I felt like I was frozen. Then the shadow started to change. It got really big, really fast, and I could hear a loud growl coming from it. I turned and hauled ass out of there. Wouldn't you believe it, Chunky and Seth were already about 100 yards ahead of me. We hauled ass for the fence, jumped it. Chunky's fat ass didn't even need help this time, and we tore off out of there. "Whoa," was all I could muster. "I feel like you might be bullshitting me still, though," I said, forcing a smile. "I swear, on the graves of the 3 guys I lost in Fallujah," he said, an oath I had learned that David held sacred. "Did you ever go back there?" I asked. "Fuck no, I didn't, and I never will." To this day, David swears that his story is true, and true to his word, he never goes anywhere near the mansion. I visited a few times in the years after he told me the story, only for the Halloween attraction, but I never ventured near the slave quarters. Knowing what I know now about this area, I'm glad I never did. But now that I think about it, the last time I went to the haunted Halloween attraction, I thought I saw 2 guys hanging from a tree. The grisly display was a way away from the rest of the attraction area. You guys don't think it was Bob? And no, that's ridiculous. And that concludes tonight's story. A chilling reminder that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried, and some Appalachian legends carry more truth than we're prepared to face. A historian's notebook full of forgotten tales now, a record of something far more terrifying. An old man's curse, a vanished friend, a mine where shadows move, and the question that still lingers: how many more secrets are hidden in these mountains? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more real-life horror from the darkest corners of the world. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, when you walk the trails of the Appalachians, some things might just be walking with you.